how do you begin that shift from a student in an ensemble to a conductor and leader of the ensemble?
That's the million dollar question. And I can't remember if I said this last week on the pod, but I'm a big believer that everything in life is the same. Fundamentally, how you approach everything in life is the same. We just have to be able to bridge things together. You have these musicians who are great musicians. They're great on their primary instruments. They're intelligent. They do everything they're supposed to do. Then they get on the podium, and then that first downbeat comes down, and they just kind of flop around, and they just, what do? I don't know what to do with my left hand, and just your mind goes blank. And so it's just a matter of I hate saying this because I want to try to defy this a lot of times, but it's conducting is just one of those things where you just, because it's so foreign to you as a musician. And if you think about it, all the way from kindergarten all the way through your sophomore or junior year of college, you have been approaching music in one way as a performer, and now you're all of a sudden expected and asked to go on the other side, literally, of the podium and do it as a teacher and as a physical communicator. So it's really hard to rewire, and I think you guys talked about this on the pod, further back. It's really hard to rewire your brain to go from performer to teacher conductor, and no matter how prepared you are, how much your score is marked, how much fundamental technique you feel like you've grounded into the ground, it's just harder to make that shift. And so the more that you do it, the easier it becomes, but there's still going to be that minefield of no man's land where you're gonna every step is gonna be a mine that's gonna throw you back 20 feet, and then you got to regain ground again. So I don't really have a good answer aside from just understanding, just having a good solid foundation and fundamental technique physically before you get on the podium, having a good understanding of the score, so that you can attempt to play the inner game with yourself once you step on that podium. And it's really what that is we are our worst enemies, our hardest critics, and we just don't give ourselves the light of day when we step on the podium, because we're just placing judgment on ourselves, placing judgment on people that might be judging us, placing judgment on those people that might be judging us that shouldn't be judging us, because we're all in the same boat. And it's just all of these mind games that we play. So a lot of it's physical, but a lot of it, I think, is really mental.
And I think a really important thing to know is, especially when you're in like a beginning conducting class, it's just like learning any other instrument. Oftentimes, we as musicians, you mentioned that we're our biggest critics. And by the time we're getting our sophomore, junior year of college, we're at some of the finest music making of our careers so far and stuff. So we have high standards already. And I really think that it's not going to be great to start out when you first start conducting. And I think as music majors, just having to take that step back and be like, okay, this is just like when I started learning my instrument. This is completely new, completely foreign to me. It's a techniques class is what it is. Like if you're taking a woodwind tech class or anything like that. And I think approaching it as thus, be like, okay, this is not going to be great to start out with, but I'm going to work and get better. The teacher's going to help me get better. I'm going to continue to practice and find the resources that will help me get better. And then you'll see that progression going along, and you'll save yourself a little bit of stress of being afraid to watch yourself.
Well, and I think the other side that we have to really think about this is it's also the direction that all this goes. So we talked a little bit about the mental game. Two researchers, Fuller and Baum, did a study. This would have been actually 45 years ago now. So in 1975, and they really broke it down. There's this fluid situation that we operate in. And when we get in front of a group for the very first time, we're really focused on us. What do I look like? How am I coming across to my students? What is my pattern like? What do I look like? Am I conveying enough to them? Are they getting what they need from me? And everything is focused around us. And so you can kind of tell, even in our own conversation, we're talking about everything that we do as teachers. And we have to understand that that's what we would call essentially level one. Now, it's a much more nuanced argument than this. We just don't have time to really dig into the article that much. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to kind of give you like this overall aspect of what our brains actually go through. And it's actually fluid. It's not like a step where once you get to step 2, you never go back to step 1. There's something that happens in the give and take of a classroom that it can be this fluid situation. But that first that first time you get in front of somebody, what you're describing is that level one, where you're so worried about what's happening around you and what you look like and how you're presenting yourself, that you miss about 95% of what you hear. So a lot of times, and I'm sure Dr. Wimmer can attest to this when he works with U-band conductors or any graduate conductors, and the first time they get in front of an ensemble and they come off the podium and you say, "What did you hear?" And they're like, "I have no idea." Yeah, it just goes, it goes right past them. You know, and that's totally normal. And so one of the things that I share in secondary methods course is that you should record every single ensemble, like every rehearsal, your first couple years, because even as you grow and get better, there's still so much that goes past your ears because you're still working through that. That's what Dr. Wimmer called the inner game. You're working on trying to figure out, how do I get outside of my own bubble? Because then once we get to level 2, we start thinking about, all right, so what are the students experiencing? Level 3 is getting to, all right, now, how am I impacting their learning through what I'm doing? So, and we're going to spend a lot of time on that portion of this discussion a couple episodes from now when we bring on Dr. Reiber. We're going to be talking about teaching from the podium and what that looks like. But just understand that you're going to go through those. And there are going to be times when you take a new job. And when you take a new job, guess what? You're going to go right back to level 1. It doesn't matter if you have 15 years experience, 20 years of experience. And just as foreshadowing, that's going to be one of my first questions to Dr. Reiber when we have him on the show is, what was it like when you stepped back in front of a middle school ensemble for the first time in 20 years? What did that feel like? Did you have that same experience and those same jitters? Because it happens on a daily basis. And it might even happen if you've taught at a school for 10 years. This pandemic, I can guarantee you the first time you step in front of an ensemble again after being apart for so long, it's going to move you around. You're going to feel different. The whole place feels different. It's okay. Experience it as it is. Know that it's going to happen. And then we just move on. It's the awareness that is much more important.